Jack the Ripper, Mystery of a Victorian Serial Killer. Jack the Ripper is the nickname given to an unidentified serial killer who terrorized the Whitechapel district of London in 1888. The killer's true identity remains a mystery to this day, making Jack the Ripper one of the most infamous and enigmatic figures in the history of crime. The Ripper is known for brutally murdering and mutilating at least 5 women, all of whom were prostitutes, in a series of gruesome and unsolved crimes. The case continues to be the subject of much speculation, investigation, and popular culture fascination, with numerous theories and suspects put forth over the years. Despite the passage of time, the true identity of Jack the Ripper remains a subject of debate and intrigue in the realm of true crime. The series of brutal murders attributed to Jack the Ripper began in August 1888 and continued until November of the same year. The victims, all prostitutes, were found in the impoverished and crime-ridden Whitechapel district of London's East End. First victim, August 31st, 1888. Mary Ann Nichols was a 43-year-old woman, and like many of the Ripper's victims, she was a prostitute. She had a troubled life and was known to struggle with alcoholism and poverty. Nichols had been separated from her husband and had several children. Mary Ann Nichols was last seen alive on the night of August 31st, 1888, at around 2:30 a.m. She was reportedly seen walking the streets of Whitechapel, a district in London's East End known for its poverty and crime. She was trying to earn money for a bed in a lodging house. Her lifeless body was discovered in the early morning hours of that same day at about 3:40 a.m. in front of a gated stable yard on Bucks Row, now Durwood Street. A cart driver named Charles Cross and a carman named Robert Paul were the ones who found her. Nichols had her throat slashed deeply, and her body had been mutilated. The wounds on Mary Ann Nichols were particularly gruesome. In addition to her throat being cut, she had a deep abdominal gash. The brutality of the murder shocked the community and the police, but it was just the beginning. Second victim, September 8th, 1888. Annie Chapman, whose maiden name was Eliza Ann Smith, was a 47-year-old woman who, like many of the Ripper's victims, had fallen into a life of poverty and prostitution. She was separated from her husband and had several children. At the time of her death, she was living in common lodging houses in the Whitechapel area. On the morning of September 8th, 1888, Annie Chapman was last seen alive in the Whitechapel district. She had been staying at Crossingham's lodging house on Dorset Street, and witnesses recalled her leaving with a man around 5:30 a.m. Her mutilated body was discovered in the backyard of 29 Hanbury Street later that day at approximately 6 a.m. The yard was part of a row of small houses and was known for its poverty and overcrowding. Like the previous victim, Mary Ann Nichols, Annie Chapman had her throat deeply slashed and her abdomen was horrifically mutilated. The injuries were gruesome, and the police at the scene quickly came to the conclusion that they were dealing with the same killer responsible for the murder of Mary Ann Nichols. This realization deepened public fear and anxiety. Third and fourth victim, September 30th, 1888. Elizabeth Stride, born Elizabeth Gustafsdotter, was a 44-year-old Swedish-born woman. She had worked as a prostitute in the past, but was living in a common lodging house at the time of her death. Stride had a somewhat less troubled past than some of the other victims, and was described as being in fairly good health. Elizabeth Stride was last seen alive on the evening of September 29th, 1888. She was seen in the company of a man at a pub on Berner Street, now Henrique Street, in Whitechapel. Witnesses reported that she appeared to be somewhat intoxicated. Her body was discovered in Dutfield's yard on Berner Street the following morning, September 30th. Unlike some of the other victims, Elizabeth Stride had her throat cut, but there was less mutilation to her abdomen. This has led some experts to believe that the killer may have been interrupted during the attack. Catherine Eddowes was a 46-year-old woman who had a difficult life. She was separated from her common-law husband, and they had 2 children together. Eddowes was known to have issues with alcohol and had spent time in workhouses. On the same night as Elizabeth Stride's murder, Catherine Eddowes was also killed. She was last seen alive at about 8:30 p.m. on September 29th, 1888, and she was taken into custody by the police for public drunkenness. She was released at about 1 a.m. on the morning of September 30th. Her body was discovered in Mitre Square in the City of London, not far from Whitechapel. At about 1:45 a.m. Catherine Eddowes had her throat slashed and her abdomen was extensively mutilated. This level of mutilation was consistent with the previous murders attributed to Jack the Ripper. The fact that two murders occurred on the same night has led to speculation that the killer was disturbed during the first murder, Elizabeth Stride, and continued his rampage with the second victim, Catherine Eddowes. Fifth victim, November 9th, 1888. Mary Jane Kelly was a 25-year-old woman, and she was one of the younger victims of the Ripper. She was known to have worked as a prostitute and was often associated with the Whitechapel area. She had a tumultuous life and was known to have lived with various men, including Joseph Barnett, who was her partner at the time of her murder. Mary Jane Kelly was last seen alive in the early morning hours of November 9th, 1888. Her partner, Joseph Barnett, reportedly saw her alive and well at around 2 a.m. that day. Her body was discovered in her small, squalid room at 13 Miller's Court, off Dorset Street, at about 10:45 a.m. The murder scene was particularly gruesome. Mary Jane Kelly's throat was deeply cut, and her body was extensively mutilated. Unlike the previous murders, which had occurred outdoors, this murder took place in the privacy of her own room. The mutilations were so horrific that it was difficult for even experienced investigators to fully assess the extent of her injuries. The brutality of this murder was shocking, even in the context of the previous Ripper killings. The police investigation, led by Detective Inspector Frederick Aberline and Inspector Edmund Reed, faced many challenges during the investigation. They were hampered by the lack of forensic tools available at the time, and the densely populated, poverty-stricken area made it difficult to gather evidence and locate witnesses. Despite extensive media coverage and public panic, the police were unable to apprehend the killer. Numerous suspects were questioned and investigated, but none were definitively linked to the murders. During the time of the murders, a series of letters were sent to the police and local newspapers claiming to be from the killer. The most famous of these is the "From Hell" letter, which contained a portion of a human kidney and was believed to be authentic. The letters, however, did not provide conclusive evidence regarding the identity of the killer.
From hell, Mr. Lusk, so I send you half the kidney I took from one woman, preserved it for you too. The piece I fried and ate it was very nice. I may send you the bloody niff that took it out if you only wait a will longer. Signed, catch me when you can, Mr. Lusk. Dear boss, I keep on hearing the police have caught me, but they won't fix me just yet. I have laughed when they look so clever and talk about being on the right track. That joke about Leather Apron gave me real fits. I am down on whores and I shan't quit ripping them till I do get buckled. Grand work the last job was. I gave the lady no time to squeal. How can they catch me now? I love my work and want to start again. You will soon hear of me with my funny little games. I saved some of the proper red stuff in a ginger beer bottle over the last job to write with, but it went thick like glue and I can't use it. Red ink is fit enough, I hope, ha. Ha. The next job I do, I shall clip the lady's ears off and send to the police officers. Just for jolly, wouldn't you? Keep this letter back till I do a bit more work, then give it out straight. My knife's so nice and sharp, I want to get to work right away if I get a chance. Good luck. Yours truly, Jack the Ripper. Don't mind me giving the trade name.
Dear Boss was postmarked on September 27th, 1888, and was addressed to the Central News Agency of London. It is one of the earliest examples of correspondence linked to the Whitechapel murders. In the letter, the writer claimed to be the killer and famously referred to himself as Jack the Ripper. From Hell was received by George Lusk, the head of the Whitechapel Vigilance Committee, in October 1888. Along with the letter, Lusk received a small box containing a preserved human kidney. There were other letters and postcards attributed to Jack the Ripper, but these two are the most well-known. Over the years, numerous theories and suspects have been proposed, including doctors, butchers, and even members of the royal family. Some of the most well-known suspects include Montague John Druitt, Aaron Kosminski, and Francis Tumblety. However, there is no concrete evidence to definitively identify Jack the Ripper, and the case remains unsolved. Despite extensive efforts to identify the killer, the true identity of Jack the Ripper remains one of history's greatest mysteries, and it's likely that we will never know for sure who was behind these gruesome murders. In addition to the 5 canonical victims commonly attributed to Jack the Ripper, there were several other cases that have been considered as potentially connected to the Ripper due to the similarities in modus operandi or circumstances. These cases are often referred to as Whitechapel murders and have generated significant debate. Stay tuned as we delve deeper into the shadows, where secrets refuse to stay buried, and where the line between justice and vengeance blurs into an ominous unknown. The next chapter of our journey is about to begin, and it will leave you yearning for answers that may never come.